If you're an average player, you want to be left alone, right? Because you want to be able to slide by. If you're a good player, you want to be coached. If you're a great player, you want the coach to tell you the truth every day. Did I hustle on that play? Did I make the right read? Did I play the guy with the right leverage? You want to know every play. Because you know why? They want to be perfect. Everybody here makes a choice to do one of those three things.
Welcome to the GOAT Consulting Podcast, a podcast dedicated to people striving to be a GOAT, the greatest of all time, serving it up in a way that you can get it in all stages of life.
Hey, I'm Colby Jubenville, and welcome to another episode of the GOAT Consulting Podcast. This is Season 2 right here in VCE Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. At the table with me, as always, is my good friend Tyler Burnett. He's the founder, the CEO of the ever-expanding GOAT family of brands in the empire. Tyler, we're glad you're here. I'm not glad you speak today because we're going to go fast through this. And then to the left, all the way in from Brentwood, wearing his, what is that? Is that Georgia Southern?
Yeah.
His Georgia Southern hat.
You'll know who they are for this weekend.
My good friend, the LinkedIn whisperer, John Byers.
Yes.
This is the GOAT Consulting Podcast. We are in Season 2. The GOAT Consulting Podcast is built first on this idea of we can serve it up in a way that you can get it. And we're here in all stages of life and business. In our 20s, they teach us to get in the game. Our 30s, we move up in the game. In our 40s, we try to stay in the game because those 30-year-olds are so damn good. In our 50s, we finally ask ourselves, what is it that I really want? And finally, it's about the GOAT, from the brain of Tyler Burnett, the intellectual capital, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. It's easy to see in sports, there are people that are recognized for their greatness. What they do elevates those around them. But in business, it's more of a challenge to see it's people and what they do that gives them energy. It gives other people energy. It creates new levels of challenge and new levels of opportunity. And all that being said, today we take one idea around the table and we bring it to our global audience.
This one's very exciting for me.
And John is the one that said we have to do this one because if anything represents what we've been through, what we're going through, and where we're moving to in 2022, it's this idea of Ted Lasso.
God, he's so good.
And the lessons that we learned.
Speaking of people that give energy, I mean, he is your guy.
Yeah. And his lessons on leadership. Well, he was voted as the most approachable leader in 2021. And the show is part sports, part romance, part business, part relationships, and part life, which is, I mean, all what we talk about.
What was it? He was the most what leader?
He was voted the most approachable leader in 2021. I made that up. But
besides Jesus, yeah. I mean, he is the guy.
Yeah. And so there's so many things to unpack
I made
about
that up.
this.
He said.
There's so many things to unpack, not pack up. We're unpacking.
Whatever.
I mean, this is
we packed up, moved to Europe.
We packed up 2021. Yeah, he did. He packed. Yeah, he packed up from America across the pond to Britain to the Premier League, which I don't even know if he knew what that was when he took that position. But you love this character. You love the show. You love the complexity behind the characters and the show. And certainly it's a heartwarming show, and let's start there.
Well, it's probably important to say, if you haven't watched Ted Lasso, first of all, don't tell me so we can still be friends. But if you haven't, this is still an episode for you. Like, you will walk away from this, Davey, and others at this table that might not have seen an episode yet and get something out of it. So don't lose heart. Hang in here with us. Ted Lasso, the premise is, and I'm not going to spoil it for you. We're not going to give away any spoilers here, but the premise of the show is you have a guy who is a mildly successful football coach at a D3 level.
Yeah.
That is hired to come run a professional European football. We may call it soccer, but has never coached soccer before. And you might ask, why in the world would that happen or someone hire him? Well, you've got a couple who gets divorced. The wife gets the soccer team in the divorce, and she wants to ruin the team, hires Ted Lasso. There's your premise of the story. To ruin AFC Richmond.
Yeah.
And quite the opposite happens once you get into this show, hence the reason we are talking about Ted Lasso. And there's three things that I wrote down why I love Ted Lasso. And not just necessarily Ted Lasso, the character, but Ted Lasso, the show. Number one, it's heartwarming. Number two, it promotes vulnerability. And number three, every character in that show is facing a mental health challenge. Now, you're probably going to need to pause this podcast and then think about that. And it's true. Every character is facing a mental health challenges. Those three things, there may not be three things more in our country, society, families, marriages, workplaces, relationships that we need to embrace as much as those three things of why I love the show Ted Lasso.
What, number one?
Heartwarming.
It's heartwarming. And we need that now more than ever.
More than ever. Lots going on in our country, world, businesses.
Coming out of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
Number two?
Promotes vulnerability.
Vulnerability.
And embraces it in such a way as that it's okay to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
As opposed to this really scary thing.
Like talking about kissing your spouse before you walk out the door to work. Yeah. I mean, that's powerful. You know, a philosopher, life coach once said, if a man feels a woman's arms around him his whole day, he can accomplish anything. That's a vulnerable statement.
Is that the same guy that awarded Ted Lasso as most approachable leader of 2021?
Hey, that was real. That was, in my mind, that was real. And then number three?
Every character is facing a mental health challenge on the show.
You know what's interesting when you said that last one, what stood out to me was this, that I noticed, and I'm a casual observer of life and people and relationships, but I noticed on television that the NFL, the National Football League, now has spots during the games that highlights the mental health challenges that players are facing and have faced through this pandemic and as professional athletes. And I thought to myself, wow, we've really changed the narrative and really moved to a new place in society when a league is willing to embrace and put that to the world to say, we've got people that play this game. They play at an elite level. It's really stressful and hard to do, and there's a lot of mental health challenges that are going on. And well, I think that speaks to what you're talking about with the power of Ted Lasso and the story itself.
Well, we can all thank Ted Lasso for bringing that to the NFL, and every other employer that I talk to these days, they are paying attention to mental health and the struggle for mental health. Is at a higher rate than it's ever been. I mean, pre-COVID, you would ask roughly any employer, they would have somewhere in the 10% range of their employees would admit to having a mental health issue. Today, it's 40 plus.
Really?
More than 4 times where it was just a year and a half ago. Maybe that's more because of the pandemic. Maybe it's more normalized than it ever has been before. All of that to say, thank you, Ted, for bringing that to all of our minds. And Ted Lasso is positive and is a good, optimistic kind of guy that he is. He's not all unicorns and rainbows. I mean, he's got his own struggles with family and mental health. I mean, he falls into that same thing. Every character is facing a mental health challenge.
Well, it's part drama, right? It's part office politics, right? But there's many lessons to be learned.
Oh, God, so many.
So many lessons to be learned.
And the vulnerability you're talking about, you know, when he when they promote the assistant coach and then he has them put together a list of about all the different downfalls of the team, and then Ted makes him share that with them, remember? And that was pretty powerful there. You know, if you're going to be if you're going to be a leader, but you can't communicate to your team what they need to work on, then you're not a leader. And I love how he had a way, instead of saying that to him, he showed him. And I think a lot of times that's what a leader will do. They won't necessarily tell you, but they'll show you, and you'll learn your own way.
And I just feel like that well said. Thank you for coming to the table today. So good to have you.
Are you wearing that Georgia hat the whole episode or
whole season?
If you're lucky. But I don't want to lose what Tyler just said, because one of the best moments for me in the 2 seasons that have happened is that moment where you have Nate, who's the assistant coach, who comes in and shares. And I'm just going to go ahead and share my GOAT, because the best scene from that scene is when he's sharing with Roy Kent. Roy Kent is my GOAT, by the way.
Roy Kent.
Because for several reasons. One, he reminds me of my 16-year-old, like to a T. He has the best crowd chant song ever of all time, which we cannot repeat on this show, but it is so good. It's fantastic. And he's the most improved human, I think, in the show, because he comes from this place, as Nate says, is, he's very angry, and he's, struggles with his place on the team, and after being there for so long and getting old and having to embrace some of that, right? And yet he goes on, as you will continue to see in the show, and how he improves and becomes more vulnerable and embraces that. It's really powerful. But Roy Kent, he's my GOAT. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere. He's Roy Kent.
What about you? The GOAT.
My GOAT is going to be Rundy Knight, former vice president at the automobile company that I used to work for.
Blew the cover.
And yes.
Episode 45, folks. Finally blows the cover.
I think it's going to be like 47 now. Episode 46. This will be
46.
46.
Well, anyways. And he did something that helped me be more vulnerable as well. And he was just a leader at a very pivotal time in my life. And when I was younger, I really thought it was all about winning and losing. And I just saw today. I didn't see necessarily tomorrow or next week or next month or next quarter. And I didn't really have that projection of, I'm here now. I want to be here. How do I put a team together in whatever department I was in or whatever company I own to where we can all achieve that goal together? Instead, I just saw I got to win today. And so I would pull out all stops to get to where I wanted to be today. And to where I thought everybody else wanted me to be today.
I love that. I think we all suffer from that, don't we, at some point in our career?
Sure.
I mean, I know I did. I mean, one of my good friends, to your point, said one time, have y'all met my friend Dr. Jubenville? He'll come in and suck the air out of the room.
Oh, wow.
And said that to me. And I walked out afterwards, and I said, I can't believe that you said that. And he said, well, you'll thank me later. He's about 15 years older than me. He said, you need to learn when to suck the air out of the room and when not to.
Well, it's a difference, and I love that story. It's a difference of being an impact player, which every team needs, and an impact coach. Because what you did, as you just described, I moved from being an impact player, an individual contributor, rock star contributor to a team, to an impact leader or coach, right? And that's really what Ted Lasso shows us so well. Like, he moves, and it doesn't matter what the sport, thing, company is. You take that kind of leadership and you put it in a scenario where he moves to a different continent, a different country, coaching a different sport. He's not focused on winning. I mean, he goes the whole, I guess I said we wouldn't, spoil anything, but he goes the whole the first season without winning a game. And yet the team is at a better place than they've ever been before. And it's a unique model that's grounded in what you just described.
Yeah, I think you made a great point about being an impact person. And if you do that, your ceiling is so low because you're just an individual contributor. And, me going through that life lesson when I was 24 or 25 years old, and obviously it being with me and continuing to learn as we're all doing, I've got the same thing that I've been working on. One of my guys with Goat Turf is an incredible performer, but he's an individual contributor, or has been. And we've had that same conversation. Like, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you can't get anybody else to believe in what you believe in or work together towards a common goal, then your ceiling is set.
Yeah.
But you start passing some of your knowledge on and training others, and now you're so much more valuable to the company. And so,
yeah, and you said believe, which clearly is a big part of Ted Lasso too, right? Like, he takes the first episode, rips the paper off and writes believe and posts it up there. In fact, I was at a Nashville soccer playoff game last week, and somebody in the crowd had this gigantic sign. It was cut exactly the way Ted Lasso has it cut, and written exactly the way. I mean, believe is a big part of his motto. And there's so many other lessons, right? How he benches the bad actors. He encourages the team to make the extra pass. Forgiveness is divine. Believe, kindness matters. But the one thing that my GOAT moment of Ted Lasso is when he beats Rupert at darts, which is his own game. And he goes on at the very end of that, and he quotes Walt Whitman, which is so beautiful of a quote. And he says, "Be curious, not judgmental." And it connects with me because I'm really good at being judgmental and not curious. And this is quite the opposite of that. And I have thought and sat and wrestled with this, and I think it takes me back to that moment I think I've shared on the show before, where for years, like 10 years, I think probably I would hang my hat on the fact that the best thing for us to do when our kids turn 16 is have them, we can buy them any car they want. I'm talking to Vanessa here, any car they want as long as they pay half. And she hated that idea for years and years. And
It's a great idea.
And that's what I thought. And I finally, in February of this year, I finally asked her, "Why do you hate it so much?" And I don't know why it took me 10 years to ask, but after listening to her, she was right.
Really?
And since we recorded last, we did buy a car for John David. Well, I will say we bought a third car that's not his. And he gets to participate in that car. And he did have a price that he had to participate in being able to drive it. But he doesn't own half of it.
So you did make him invest in some of it.
Yes.
But you moved from this place of it has to be half.
So Vanessa, if I could try to shorten it up, I said, why do you hate that idea so much? And she says, well, first of all, if he's got $2,000 for a car and we're going to contribute to, which is about what we thought he would have, a $4,000 car is not going to meet my safety standards.
Yeah.
That's one. She said, number two, knowing what we know about him, if he pays half of that car will be his. And we don't really want that. We'll get to have a choice in 2 years whether or not we want to send him with that car to college or not. And I thought, ooh, that's really good. And there were some other things, but those are kind of the two things that made me curious and
not judgmental.
And he did have to pay $2,000 to be able to drive the car, and that stung, but kind of achieved that point we were wanting him to have.
Yeah.
And it's not his car; it's
Yeah.
our third car that he gets to participate in.
I love it.
It was great.
That episode kind of brings me back to a Bible verse, James 1:19. It says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." And I think I've done kind of the vice versa of that.
Yeah.
Quick to get angry, quick to speak, and slow to listen. And as I get older and the more I hear about, you being a father and all those things and being a better husband, it's about being slow to speak. And when you do speak, maybe asking more questions. That way that you can listen and you understand the other perspective, because I think a lot of times it's about perspective, and your perspective was focused on one thing when it came to the car. But a lot of times if you're willing to listen to other perspectives and be curious, then I think it takes a lot of that judgment out of there, because you start changing your perspective a little bit.
I was at Antracon down in Pensacola speaking a couple weeks ago, and there was one speaker that said that in 7 seconds that we make our mind up about the conversation or the person in front of us, and whether we're going to participate and whether we're going to allow them to belong. And the exercise that he'd made the group do that I thought was so powerful was that he said, there's a group of 500 people. He said, I want you to go and I want you to find somebody that you don't know, and I want you to talk to them for 7 minutes. So the whole crowd disperses and goes and finds people that they don't know. And then he comes back and he said, so tell me about it. So the crowd told him about it. He said, no, I do. I want you to go find somebody that you do know, and I want you to talk to them for 7 minutes. And so they do that. And he comes back to, what's the difference between that? And they talk about the difference between the two. And he said, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to stay in touch with the people that you just met that you don't know, that you're ready to let them be a part of what you belong to and what they belong to, what you want to belong to. And I think that and so I stay in touch with this one guy that I met behind me. His name's Hammer, and he just texted me. He said, hey, when can I catch up with you this week?
First name, MC?
Yes. And makes me think about what you just said. In that 7 seconds, your experiences and your story and your identity is no. He's got to pay half of it. That's where you're coming from in the way that you were raised.
Yep.
And that now as a man, when you know what's ahead of him and what's in front of him, what he's going to have to do to win in life today, and then to be able to spend that 7-minute conversation and go back and rethink that and say, well maybe I can see this differently.
Yeah.
I think is a powerful lesson that we all can learn, and certainly how Lasso is approachable. And you talk about, Rundy Knight and being approachable as a leader and saying, hey, think through this, as opposed to the decisions that you were making in that time.
The practical for me in this is super practical. But when I find myself wanting to have these stakes in the ground, you pay half, we'll buy you any car you want. When I feel that stake in the ground moment, to be curious around not only the moment, but what else might be out there that I'm not leaning towards or looking at or considering, and why I might be wrong. One of the best people I know at this is my son Max. And an example of that is the other day when I picked him up from school, and he said, because he asked great questions, he's 11, and I pick him up from school, and he says, Dad, how was your day? I said, oh, it was good. And he goes, why was it good? Like, it's those moments that we can, in fact, and I talk about this in our last episode, but those moments where we can choose to build trust or we build betrayal. And that sounds like it's a little harsh, but it's in those moments that we can really lean in and be curious, or we choose not to be. And he was curious. And I think as we start to get those stake in the ground moments, for me, being curious as to why I feel strongly about the way that I do, and being curious about what else might be out there that could be better. Because it's not about being right, it's about getting it right.
Why do I feel strongly about the way that I do? It makes me think about my favorite moment with Ted Lasso is when Trent, he's from the Independent. Is that right?
Oh God, yeah.
And he says,
so good.
He says this, and he's a reporter, and he says this about Ted and what he's done with the team. If the Lasso way is wrong, it's hard to imagine being right. In a business that celebrates ego, Ted reins his in. His coaching style is subtle. It never hits you over the head. Whether that means allowing followers to become leaders, or in a show of respect, eating food so spicy it's sure to wreak massive havoc on his intestinal system. And though I believe that Ted Lasso will fail here, and Richmond will suffer the embarrassment of relegation, I won't gloat when it happens because I can't help but root for him. That's what he wrote in his piece about Ted.
You know what I might ask Trent? What is your definition of failure?
Yeah.
Because everything you just described right there doesn't speak failure to me. Because failure, maybe he ends up not being the coach there, or the team doesn't go on to win a World Cup. But what do you mean by that, right? Like, lean into that kind of curiosity. Everything he just described is what we want in our own households and our own businesses.
And I love it from the standpoint, well, I think what he means failure there, obviously, is winning and losing, right? I mean, that's how we keep the score, and that's how most people keep score
Sure.
in professional sports today. But what I love the most is where he says that in a business that celebrates ego, Ted reins his in. If I look back on the leaders that have had the greatest impact on me, my GOAT for today is Norman Joseph. And what Norman said, a very similar moment that you had with Randy, is that Norman said, Colby, I'm here to help you do one thing, and that's take the next step. And to me, once somebody said that to me, that subtle moment of leadership, I thought to myself, I'll do whatever this man asked me to do. And I'll do it even to a level that he doesn't even understand that I can do it. And I think that's what, when you think about Ted Lasso and why he won the most approachable coach and leader in 2021.
Yes, of all time.
I think that's what we're speaking to.
I like it. So many good lessons from Ted.
So go back and there's two. Is there one season? Two seasons?
There's 2 seasons.
2 seasons. That's what I
Yeah.
thought. Are they going to have a third?
Oh yeah,
Third season.
it's already approved.
Ask
Renew your Apple TV subscription.
ask Santa for Apple TV subscription.
Might be coming up on one of the future
But that
episodes
means-
about what I want for Christmas.
But that means that you're going to have to watch TV too. So
Or at least some Ted Lasso.
yeah, watch a little Ted Lasso. Get past the YouTube
Will
clips.
do you good.
All right.
For Tyler Burnett and John Byers, I'm Colby Jubenville. Make sure you tune into Apple TV and watch Ted Lasso, and also make sure you tune into the GOAT Consulting Podcast. That is what we do. That's why we're here. We look forward to seeing you more in Season 2. This is the GOAT Consulting Podcast.